Hello and welcome back to my sewing adventures. My name is Annette and this is Nellie and we're sewing in Michigan. Yes, we are. This weekend, I'm working on the Clover skirt from Rosery Apparel. I'm making view A, which is pictured here. And I cut it out last night and I used this beautiful kind of crepey floral material that I found in my stash. I'm not sure exactly what it is, where I got it, I don't remember. But this was a pretty big piece of fabric. I believe this was 3 yards of dressmaker width material. So quite a lot of fabric, but the pattern envelope says for my size it requires 2.5. I don't know if that's, sorry about the focus problem. I don't know if that's yards or meters. It might be meters, but at any rate, I only had little scraps left over, so it took quite a lot of material. Now, the way it goes together, you can see in the drawings here, there's a back piece that's cut on the fold and then a front panel that's cut down the middle. That's where your button placket is going to go. And then there are 4 side panels. So each of these sides has a side seam down it where there will be a side seam pocket. There's also a waistband facing and a front facing that you need to cut and to interface. So it does take a lot of fabric. I'm imagining it's going to be a very full and swishy skirt around the bottom. Now, the view A skirt, when I hold the pattern piece up to me, it comes almost down to my ankles, and I am 5'7", so I think it's quite a long skirt. You can see there's also a short version that there's a shortened line on the pattern. And these are the instructions here. So I'm going to get started soon. It looks like the first thing you do is put the pockets into the side panels. Here is a picture of the pattern pieces, and you can see this number 3 piece is the side panel, and that's where the pockets are going to go. And then you basically sew all the panels together, put on the waistband facing and front facing, and then you do buttons and buttonholes down the front. Now, I'm kind of between sizes, so I cut the larger size, but once I get to this point, I think I can kind of pin the skirt around my waist and see if I need to adjust the sizing at all. The sizing around the waist, I think, would be pretty easy to adjust by just maybe taking in these seams here just a tiny bit if I need to, and the corresponding ones on the back. So I think there's going to be a little bit of fitting involved in this skirt, but I'll keep you posted. I think this is a really pretty fabric. I'm not normally much of a skirt wearer, but I do like this one. I think the reason I don't normally like skirts is that a lot of them are bulky around the middle, and I'm thick in the middle, and a lot of them that have gathers or elasticized waists, I feel like they add bulk around my middle. But I thought this style might help to kind of be more slimming on me. We'll see what happens. So that's my current project. Here's what I have so far. This project has been a little tricky. The fabric is kind of a crepey, slinky, slippery material, so cutting it out was a bit of a challenge, and I found that a lot of my pieces were not quite perfectly even and symmetrical. And of course we have ways of correcting for that, but it was partly a challenge because there's all these different panels all the way around, but each panel is cut in a particular shape. They're either triangular or they're straight on one side and curved on another. So you need to get the different shapes right, and you need to cut the notches right. Now there were single notches, double notches on various pattern pieces on the edges. And because the material was so slippery, my notches weren't necessarily even or symmetrical either. So there were times where I was looking at a notch and saying, is that a single or a double? I can't quite tell. So there was a bit of pattern piecing, puzzle piecing going together as I sewed those panels all the way around. As you saw in the instructions I showed you earlier, you know, it's pattern piece 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, like that, and you sew them together in a particular order. Part of the problem too was that after I cut the pattern pieces out, I removed the paper pattern from the fabric, and because these were all different yet similar shapes, I had a bit of a challenge. Like, are you a number 2 piece or number 3 piece? And are you a right side of the number 2 piece or the wrong side of the number 3 piece? So if anybody makes this pattern, I would recommend that you keep the pattern pieces on the fabric until you're ready to use that piece of fabric, so you can keep it straight which panel is which. Other than that, the only challenge I really had was fitting, and that is not the fault of the pattern. It's the fact that my size has changed and I don't really know what size I wear, and I wasn't trusting the measurements. So I originally cut this way too big because I wasn't trusting the measurements on the pattern envelope. You know, we get used to thinking we are a size number, whatever it is, and it's scary to cut something a little smaller, but I got there in the end. I had sewed it up to this point, pinned it on like this, and the waist was too big. It was really pulling down from here. So I went back and took in these 2 seams right here. The first panel, this front straight panel, I took in this seam right here. You can't really see on this fabric, but taking in that seam about 3/4 of an inch on both sides has pulled the waist into where I need it to be. So the next step is to apply the waistband, and what I'm going to do is the waistband is prepped and ready, but I want to lay it up against the skirt as I have it right now and see if I need to trim a little off the ends or how I need to adjust that, because the waistband, it's actually a facing, so I'll sew it on, but it'll be turned to the inside, and then you do your button placket, and that makes everything around the waist and around the front very straight and reinforced. So there's not a whole lot of give or ease in the waist once you put that waist facing on. So I want to get the size right. But other than that, I'm pleased with it. I think it's pretty. It's very long. Let me back up. You can see here it's almost ankle length. Of course, when we put on the waist and we hem it, it'll bring that up a little bit. I do like long skirts, so that length doesn't really bother me. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. It's going to be pretty, and I guess because I had to make so many fitting adjustments, we could consider this one a wearable toile, and then the next time I make the pattern, I'll know how to adjust it differently. For one thing, I will cut it on a smaller size line, but I'll also know to use a slightly more stable fabric, or if that isn't possible, to be a lot more careful in the way I cut my notches so that the notches are actually helpful, which would be a good thing. See you in a minute. It's finally done, and forgive my disheveled appearance. It's late, I'm tired. It took me many more hours to get it to this stage, but it's Saturday night and I wanted to wear it to church on Sunday. So I hung in there with all the problems I was having. Now, none of these problems were the fault of the pattern. Um, it was just one of those series of unfortunate events kind of things where everything kept going wrong. I went to put in the buttons in the buttonholes, and on the third buttonhole, I sewed it in the wrong place and didn't realize it until after it was sewn, but I hadn't cut it open yet. So I unpicked it and did it over. And I have never unpicked a buttonhole before. That was quite an undertaking. Got all the buttons done and the buttons sewed on, and then the hem was uneven, noticeably so, especially in the front. So I had already done the hem, so I had to take that out and refigure it and put it back in. And I did use bias tape on the hem this time around, just to keep everything nice and secure. So she's done. She's beautiful. As I said before, I'm going to consider this a toile, because if I make it again, and I think I will, I now know where all the challenges and pitfalls are in making this pattern. Challenges and pitfalls for me. Again, if I redo it, I will be more careful about which pattern pieces are which. I will size it correctly, and I will be mindful of this button placement situation and things like that. So overall, I'd say it's a success, even though it was quite vexing. I watched several episodes of Bridgerton while making this, so the word vexing comes to mind. But all is well. It's done. I love it. I think it will go with lots of things, and we'll call it a success. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.